Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on using social media in promotion and tenure. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're looking forward to a really interesting session with some brilliant guest speakers that we've got lined up. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the webinar. This is being recorded and we'll make the recording available afterwards. So if you want to recap or share it with colleagues, that will be an option. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just pop them in the Q&A box. We'll get to them at the end, and we're looking forward to answering any queries you might have. And please let us know if you can't hear or see. We will do what we can to fix that for you. So, hello, I'm Catherine Williams. I head up the marketing at altmetric.com. I'm joined today by Daniel Cabrera, who's an emergency physician and clinician educator at the Mayo Clinic. And Dr. Gerard Gardner, who is Associate Professor of Pathology and Dermatology at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. They're two really engaged people on social media, and I know they've got some great tips and insights to share with you today. So our agenda, I'm just going to give a very quick introduction to the topic. We'll then have the presentations from Daniel and Gerard, and then time for questions at the end. So, a bit of an overview. I think we're all aware that in the last kind of 5 years or so in particular, the demands for evaluation of research and researchers themselves has been evolving quite a lot. On this slide, you'll see some examples from the kinds of things that funders are now asking for. They're really interested to see the broader impacts of research, to see more about how researchers are engaging with a broader audience, and to see where research that they're supporting is having an influence beyond the academy. And the same is true of researchers themselves. So as you go for things like promotion or for management positions within your institution, I think many people are finding that they're often asked to demonstrate not just what they've published and how much that has been cited, for example, but what impact they're really having in the academic community and far beyond it. And this kind of really ties into this bigger idea of what it is to be a researcher today. At Altmetric, we hosted a user conference a few weeks ago in Manchester in the UK. And we had a really insightful presentation from Andy Meir, who is a really active science communicator. And he proposed this interesting idea of what is it to be a researcher and the 10 degrees of science communication. So what he kind of presented was that being a researcher is no longer just about doing your work and writing it up and getting it submitted and published in a journal. But it's about all of these other things as well. So getting out there, engaging with broader audiences, learning from how your research is received. So not only are people benefiting from hearing from you about your research, but you're getting really valuable feedback that you can use to develop either your skills or even the kind of concepts around the work that you're doing. And I think as well, it's kind of generally accepted now that the academic use of social media generally is growing. We certainly see this at Altmetric, especially on platforms like Twitter. I think every year since we started, more and more researchers and academics have been on there sharing papers or other forms of research outputs. There's been a big drive in recent years in the mainstream media for news outlets to cite the original source of their stories. And that's been great to see, giving the public and those wider audiences those opportunities to go back and read that original research. And of course, this is only improving with the increase in open access publications. So research rather, that was once locked away in a closed academic journal, accessible only to institutions who subscribed, is now much more openly available and made much more directly available to broader audiences. And that's not to say that all academic use of social media is completely serious, of course. I think we've probably all seen the jokes that go around on Twitter and other networks of people talking about why academics really use Twitter, for example. And I'm the first person to procrastinate over an essay, so I can sympathize with this to some extent. But I think, that there is a serious element to this, in that being a researcher is no longer just sitting in your lab or giving your lectures. It's about getting out there and engaging with those wider audiences. And you might think it's all very well, okay, you're going to go out there and potentially do this stuff, but what's the point? How can you capture it all, and how will that tie back to the other demands on your time? Adult Metric, we've done a lot of work, obviously, to capture and collate this attention in a way that makes it accessible, and that means that you can easily track the outcomes and the impacts of that engagement or outreach. And actually so that you can see, even if perhaps you're not out there engaging that much online at the moment, what other people are saying about your work. So tools like Altmetrics can be really valuable for seeing what people are saying, seeing why they're talking about it. And then if you do choose to go out there and push your work out or talk with those other audiences, you can start to see the effects of that in the aggregated altmetric attention score, but also in the underlying context and the qualitative data that we provide, so you can actually see who is talking about it and what they're saying. And of course, pulling it all together. So altmetrics, like any other metric or measure of engagement and influence and reach and impact, they don't exist in a vacuum. They just form a small part of this much bigger picture. And of course, any engagement work that you're doing also contributes to all of this. So when you're thinking about applying for promotion or for tenure, particularly in the US, there's a very rich story that you can tell, not just around your research, but around who you are as a researcher. And some of the kind of more quantitative things that I've outlined here, such as citations, views, case studies, even perhaps citations in policy documents, so evidence of where you're having that influence on public policy, are all things that you can draw together to really tell the story of who you are and what the value of your research is. And of course, in more recent years, as the use of kind of scholarly communications channels have evolved, a number of researchers have started to look into this. It's kind of research about research. It's all getting a bit meta. On the left here, some of you will be familiar with this study that was done in 2016 to explore the different communications tools that were used by researchers and how those have evolved. And increasingly, we see studies that question the use of social media and altmetrics and what role they play in helping us to evaluate or to understand research impacts. And we know that many researchers struggle with the question of whether or not they should be using social media. What will it deliver for them? How should they go about it? And how can they best equip themselves to deal with what they might find there? So hopefully in this webinar, you'll hear some great tips from some people who are far more experienced in this than me. I'm going to hand over to Daniel now to give you his experience of using social media to promote his research. Daniel, are you able to share your screen?
Absolutely, I'm going to do that right now. So thank you everybody for the invitation. Thank you, Catherine and Altmetrics, for the opportunity to talk about digital scholarship and alternative metrics and academic promotion. And I'm going to talk about mostly about social media. And I think the first question is, why are we doing this? There's a few things to consider. All of us who are scholars or academics around the world, we have a social contract with our communities. I'm happen to be a physician, so my social contract may be a little bit different from other scholars, particularly scientists. Part of my contract is to take care of patients, but from an academic perspective, I'm also part of this contract that I need to create evidence, I need to create science, and I need to advance science. And sometimes the thing that we forget about our social contract is we not only need to create science, we need to influence public policy, and we need to influence public opinion about science. And sometimes we forget that. And what is important right now is there's a huge space that social media has created in the last 15 years. And as part of our social contract, as part of our duty with science and with patients and with the users of our work, is we need to occupy the spaces. Because if we don't occupy the spaces, somebody else is going to use the spaces. And there are significant different agendas in these people who may occupy the spaces. And I see social media as an example of the new salon. 3,000 years ago, we have the agora, and then we have the salon, and then we have the public square. So right now, social media is the current public square. And as scholars, we need to be there. So I think that is the most important thing about scholarship, academics, and social media. We need to occupy the space, because if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And another important thing about digital scholarship, social media scholarship, and promotion is many of us in this webinar now understands this, but it's important to say it again. Social media is an incredible tool to improve knowledge translation, to help with awareness of the research, to help with dissemination of the research, to help with reinforcement of evidence, and trying to shape both the crafting of science and public policy. The third thing that I think is important why we should do this is the paradigms about open knowledge, open science, and open data. We're moving from this paradigm for the last century that the knowledge, the data, and the science belong to a few people behind some walls. And before were the walls of universities and academic institutions, right now are paywalls when you need to pay to access some knowledge. But fortunately, we're moving away from that paradigm. And now with the advent of open knowledge concepts, open architecture concepts, we're moving in the right direction. And social media is the electricity of the open knowledge, open data, and open science movements. And we need to know how to use it. And we need to move not only about open publication, we need to move into open data. All data should be available. We need to move into open peer review, and hopefully post-publication open peer review. And that's important because that is going to happen some way and somehow using social media. So why not? What are the challenges? What are the obstacles about social media scholarship? The main reason we wrote the framework that we wrote at Mayo Clinic, and the main reason because I've been working on this in the last couple of years, is because when I start doing some social media-based education for residents or registrars, my colleagues like the idea, but the main complaint they have is if they invested too much of a time in social media scholarship and social media education, they're getting no reward. There was no currency. There was no token for the academic work that they did in social media. And actually that is true today too. So I think we start working on this framework to provide social media, to provide academic tenure to social media activities, because it's the only way to provide currency to scholars. And it's important to have a framework to do that. The other complaint that my colleagues and my friends have about your social media activities is that the impact was difficult to evaluate. It was difficult to quantify. You can make exactly the opposite argument about the impact and the quantification of impact in social media. But for most traditional academicians, it's really difficult for them to understand the new tools, the new paradigms of appraisal that digital scholarship involve. And one of the great things about social media and digital platforms is we have fairly rich and granular data about the dissemination, distribution, and impact of our work. But we need to understand how to use it. And we need to make understand the promotions committee and tenure committees how to appraise, how to evaluate, and how to understand that data. We're here about alternative metrics. We're here about trying to understand this new world of using non-traditional metrics to evaluate scholarship and to evaluate social media scholarship. And we need to understand that not only the traditional methods are important, such as the Thomson impact score. We need to understand that as important as citations is the impact that our work creates in the real world. It is important that our work is cited in traditional and regular media. It's important that our work is part of a conversation on social media, because that tells you that your work is creating an impression, is creating some attention. And that's part about influencing the public opinion, influencing the general population, influencing policy. That is key to our work. And we can't do that if the only people who read our work are other scholars. We need to be sure that the general population and the people who's in charge of policy also have access to our work. And we quantify that with alternative metrics. My friends make fun of some of people who are very important in social media academics, so to speak, with the Kardashian index. And for those of you who are not familiar with this index, it's basically a ratio of Twitter followers versus citations. So the higher your Kardashian score, the more famous you are in social media than in traditional media. And that is actually a bad thing for many people. And it's probably a bad thing for all of us, because if you want to influence policy, if you want to influence the general population, you need to be first influencing your sphere of knowledge. And after you have some influence in your circle of knowledge, you can start influencing the rest of the world, probably. The other thing about using social media and digital scholarship for dissemination and for knowledge translation is the ability to create networks. Traditionally, all the scholar work was only impactful in scholarly circles. But now with social media, you have the opportunity to create communities of practice. You have the opportunity to influence and work with people from many, many walks of life. And this paper that we published last year, we showed that, at least in terms of education, creating communities of practice using social media platforms can influence actually the delivery of care. So it's something that is really powerful that we need to harness. And this is important from a theoretical perspective too. We need to understand that what we say in the platforms, there's this mixture between the medium and the message. And we need to understand that both are important when we deliver social media academics. So how to do it? And this is basically based on the paper we wrote this year about creating social media portfolios. But this slide is interesting. It's just a slide about something called the free open access medical education movement, which is relatively important in medicine and in social media medical scholarship. Life in the Fast Lane is Australian blog, and it's run by basically emergency physicians and critical care physicians for free. This is just because they love to do it. There's no revenue involved in this. And this website has more views and more visits than the two most important journals in medicine, or among the two most important journals in medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is just to show the impact of what social media can do. And one of the messages that I typically tell my friends is, resistance is futile. Either you want it or not. The conversation is happening in social media. And if you don't join the conversation, you run the risk of becoming obsolete. This is the paper we published, and I'm going to summarize the important concepts from the paper. If you want to use digital scholarship and social media scholarship for your academic promotion, you need to do a few things. First, you need to follow the rules, and follow simple rules. First, you need to be professional in social media. I don't think you can run a social media professional identity or professional branding, and at the same time doing things that may be seen as unprofessional. So I think you need to have a clear boundaries about professional digital scholarship. Also, most of us have institutions that have clear guidelines about the use of social media. I'm helpful that my institution is fairly progressive and fairly clear about how to use social media, and there's not only rules, there's encouragement about using social media. But the first thing is you need to follow the rules. Second is, this is a professional use of a medium. So you need to be professional about using this. You just can't go and create a Facebook page or a Twitter account and just talking about whatever you think is important. You need to have a goal. You need to have a niche. And you need to have an audience. That is very important. If you are a physicist, you need to figure out what part of physics is going to be your niche. And you need to understand what is going to be your audience. You may be talking to other physicists. You may be talking to postgraduate students. You may decide to talk to the general population. But you need to have a clear audience of what you're doing. And what is important too is, as any scientific or any scholar endeavor, you need to have clear metrics. And you need to have clear feedback loops to figure out what you're doing is important and what you're doing is valuable. So conceptually, you need to have a niche, you need to have an audience, you need to pick a platform. And with this, I mean, you may want to use a blog of your own, you may want to use a podcast, you may want to use a Facebook page, or a combination of all of them. And you need to have clear metrics and clear goals. You need to have a niche, you need to have an audience, you need to have a platform, and you need to have metrics. And that is the recommendation I typically give to people who want to do social media or digital scholarship. And when you have that, you need to create your portfolio. And your portfolio needs to have the things that classically are in a portfolio. You need to have, as I said before, what is your audience? What is your instructional or your academic instrument? You need to have your scientific or academic philosophy. You need to have evidence that what you're doing is meritful. You need to have evidence of impact. And the good thing about social media, we have very rich and granular data about that. And you need to have proof of quality. Once you have done that, you have created a social media portfolio. And when you have this portfolio, you can progress in your academic career because you can show that you are actually making an impact in science. Here in this link, you can have some more resources with some papers and some presentations that can be helpful down the road. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Daniel. I think some really interesting points for people to think about in there, and some really great tips for people who are considering, or researchers who are considering, how they might go about using social media and why they should. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Jared. Jared, are you able to share your screen?
Yes. Can you see it? Does that work?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so I'm Jared Gardner, and I do dermatopathology and bone and soft tissue sarcoma pathology at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. And I'm going to touch on kind of some more details similar to what Dr. Cabrera covered in his talk. But I'm going to save you some time first. I'm actually going to make my entire promotion and tenure packet available for download on my website. It'll be in a document format that'll be editable. It's not quite ready yet, but if you just keep this little link, it'll be there throughout the talk. That link is my social media guide for pathologists and other doctors, and I will post all of it there because it took me a long time to put together my P&T packet, and I hate to see so many doctors spend so much time on paperwork. And so if I can make that easier so you can care for more patients, then that's awesome. And also I have a video about how to build a medical CV, particularly with how to put social media activity and kind of create that portfolio of the work that you're doing online. And I also have a download link that you can download an editable copy of my CV that you can use if you'd like to craft your own. All right, so let's talk about promotion and tenure. I'm a clinical educator track, tenure track, and there are different tracks, and every institution's a little different. But basically, when we look at promotion and tenure in academic medicine, there are four main pillars that you're judged on, and these are teaching and mentoring, research, patient care, and leadership and administrative activities. And, you know, every different tracks are different on what they value, and different organizations look at these things differently. But those are the four main core ideas. And, you know, for me as a doctor, patient care is the most important thing that I do, obviously. And I think most doctors don't have a problem with that part. They can say, well, I take care of patients and I see a lot of patients, but it's figuring out the other three and how to get enough teaching, enough research, enough leadership on their CV so that they can go up successfully and get promoted. So that's what we're going to really focus on today. And these boil down in the traditional sense. Traditionally, teaching and mentoring is lectures or invited talks, and plus evaluations from your learners. Research, of course, is peer-reviewed publications. And leadership would be committee and board memberships, boards of organizations, editorial boards, etc. And when you put all of those four things together, the goal is that eventually you'll have a national and even international professional reputation that develops. This is the kind of very basic summary or skeleton version of the traditional way of doing promotion and tenure. And this is what P&T committees still look at. So how can social media help us accomplish that structure we just talked about? Well, I think there's a few ways. Number one, I think you can leverage your social networks to more efficiently accomplish the traditional P&T activities. You publish a peer-reviewed paper, well then share it on social media so it has a wider reach. Maybe that'll lead to collaborations down the road with people that you didn't even know had the same interest as you. Things like that. But there's another side to that as well. We can use social media to develop new and innovative approaches to teaching, even to doing research in the online sphere. But the difference is that these are very unusual, and for traditional-minded academic people, these things don't necessarily seem to be real or legitimate sometimes. And so that's why it's really important that we obtain and record metrics and analytic data that help us to translate these novel approaches into the traditional language that more traditionally minded members of a P&T committee might be more willing to accept as legitimate. And we're going to talk about how to do that. And then number three is, of course, using social media eventually will build your national and international reputation. I'm only 5 years into practice, and pathologists and other doctors all over the world know who I am, not because of all the amazing papers I've written. I think I've written some nice papers, but they know me because I tweet and I post on Facebook and Instagram. So let's talk about how to use social media for teaching. So I use a variety of platforms and I share similar content across those platforms. This is my Facebook page. And so if you have, most of you probably have a Facebook account, but this is a page which is you can build this from your personal Facebook account, but this is a public thing that anyone on the internet can see, and they can see anything you post there, but they don't have to see pictures of your pets or your kids or what you ate for dinner last night. So it's a nice wall to build between your professional life on Facebook and your personal life. And it's also great because your family and friends may not want to see pictures of tumors and things like that, or whatever kind of stuff you post. So it's a nice way to share content on Facebook. So I'll share a picture of something like a nevoid melanoma, which is a really challenging melanoma that to diagnose, and to give some tips about how to make that diagnosis so that other pathologists can learn. And what's nice is you can see the metrics down here. Look, 199 people liked this, 26 people shared it. So you can get that kind of information, but you can go further, and that's what's nice about a Facebook page. A regular Facebook account gives you this information, but once you have a page, you can see all sorts of details. Here's a picture of Giardia that I shared, and look, you can see how many people liked it, loved it, how many people said, wow. You can see if anyone hid the post or unliked your page because of the post. You can see that 20,983 people saw this post. It gives you a lot of metric data, and you can see this on every post you make on your page. So it's really valuable information to have when you're trying to see how well your activity correlates with impact. And Twitter is a similar story. I share similar content on Twitter, like this picture of bone remodeling, and you can see it got a lot of retweets and likes down here, which is nice. And if you have a Twitter account, you can go to analytics.twitter.com and sign up. It's a one-time free sign up, and it will start tracking a lot more metric data, and it will tell you, in the past 28 days, 663,000 impressions. That's how many times my tweets were seen in the past month. And you can see how each individual tweet performed and how many people retweet you or click your links. It's really amazing data that's automatically calculated and freely available to you, which is really very useful. And YouTube's a similar thing. I make teaching videos about pathology, and I even made my actually most popular video is this normal skin histology video I made for my own medical students. I'm a course co-director at my university, and I made this for my medical students, and they liked it enough that they said it should be part of the curriculum. So now the students actually are assigned to watch this video on YouTube, and then they'll have 3 exam questions on their exam that count towards their grade. And what's nice is that I'm able to take content like that and use it to teach my own students, but then anyone around the world can also watch this video and learn from it, even people in developing nations or places where they may not have access to as many useful educational resources. So I think that, to me, every time I look at anything I'm doing with teaching, anything I'm doing traditionally, I think, how can I apply social media to this and expand it and distribute it more broadly and help more people with it? And in the process, all those things build you up for promotion and tenure too. So everyone wins. And I really love the analytic data on YouTube. You can see the average amount of time people watch a video, 7 minutes for my videos, which is nice. It's almost 700,000 minutes of watch time in the past 5 years, and most of it within just the past year. You can see how the videos are ranked, how many people liked, or you always have to have a few people that don't like you. That legitimizes your activity online, I suppose. But anyway, I think these kinds of details are really useful for me to know what kind of material I'm making. Is it useful to my online learners or not? And also it's nice because when I try to convince my promotion and tenure committee that these videos actually matter, I have this data to show them. Let's talk about research. So here's an example. This is a review article I wrote with my friend Nicole Riddle. It's not technically hard research, but it's a review article. It was published in Surgical Pathology Clinics a couple years ago, and when it was in its early online stage, before it was actually published in print, it went on PubMed. And so we took one of the tables of all the different new molecular abnormalities and sarcomas, and we shared that with a link to PubMed on Twitter. And this was a couple years ago. I maybe had half the followers I have now. And look, I think this was in a week's time, we had 7,000 people had seen, or 7,000 times this tweet had been seen. Now, only 84 of them actually clicked the link and followed it through. And I don't know how many of those people actually read the paper, but the point is that probably thousands of people potentially saw that we wrote this paper about soft tissue tumors. So that we had already done the hard work of publishing the paper. Why not expand the reach and the impact of that by sharing it on Twitter? And of course, Altmetric will track these kinds of shares as well. And, I created a couple of Facebook discussion groups to teach pathology, my subspecialties of derm path and sarcoma pathology, but also other friends from around the world created groups to focus on different subspecialties of pathology. So we felt like our groups were educational and helpful, but what we did is we took that novel form of online education and then we wrote a paper about it that we published in a peer-reviewed journal. So see, we're translating the social media language, the social media activity into academic currency, something we can use towards promotion and tenure, and also something that will reach people who read print journals, but maybe don't go on Facebook and don't even know that these groups exist. So it's a nice way for us to have a broader reach to a different audience than actually actively uses social media already. And also it's a great way to help show that what we're doing is actually of value enough to be put into a peer-reviewed journal. And what's interesting, I have only met a couple of my co-authors in real life. The rest of them I've only met on Facebook. And to me, that's one of the most fun parts of doing academic work on Facebook is all the wonderful people you meet in the virtual sphere. In 2015, I helped organize a live tweet group for the USCAP meeting, which is one of the most prominent pathology meetings in the world. And we tweeted about the meeting, and it was very successful. And it was so successful that the leadership of USCAP asked me to create a social media subcommittee to run the Twitter and Facebook accounts for the organization, and for me to be the chair of that. So again, this is a novel thing that we're doing, live tweeting. Maybe other people don't think that's legitimate. But then when I got to be a chair of a committee, or a subcommittee rather, that actually counts towards traditional P&T activities, right? That's a traditional thing. Being on a committee is part of the leadership aspect of promotion. And then we went a step further and we wrote a paper about it, and that got published in a prominent pathology journal, Modern Pathology. So these things help, again, create academic currency from the work that we're doing on social media. We created a pathology Twitter journal club to discuss articles from the literature on Twitter. A lot of other specialties of medicine have done this too. And we got this listed on PubMed.gov because PubMed Commons actually tracks Twitter journal clubs that are medical. And so again, this legitimizes and shows that this is a legitimate activity. And then we submitted an abstract to the USCAP meeting and presented this as a poster. And we actually found that it was interesting to see how Altmetric responded well to us having an article in the Pathology Journal Club. So all of these things, again, legitimize and create the things that you can put on your CV and that even traditional promotion and tenure-minded people will accept as legitimate. Also, I've done research via social media or focusing on social media. So I volunteer in a variety of sarcoma and rare tumor patient support groups on Facebook. I started doing that to help out and to be an advocate for the patients and also to learn from them and let them educate me. And we decided, my medical student Jasmine Howler decided to work with me and make a survey to ask these patients how they like having doctors, particularly pathologists, in their group. And what's amazing is that in 3 weeks' time, 542 patients and family members, all of these are people with rare tumors that most doctors have never even heard of, very rare things. And we got 542 responses in 3 weeks with a SurveyMonkey survey. And that paper actually just got accepted in Archives of Pathology, so hopefully will be online ahead of print very soon. So these are all the ways that I use social media towards research type activities. Now for leadership, I've obtained a lot of different leadership positions that again are legitimate positions, but the reason I got the position is because of social media. I am the chair of social media for the USCAP and also the American Society of Dermatopathology. And recently I was actually elected to the board of directors for the American Society of Dermatopathology. And I really think that at only 5 years in practice, one of the big components of what allowed me to be voted by my colleagues into such a wonderful position is because I've been active on social media and they've seen how useful that is to the community of dermatopathologists around the world. And I was also appointed as a deputy editor-in-chief on the Journal Archives of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. And it's the same thing. Again, I'm not a deputy editor-in-chief because I'm a world-famous researcher. I think I've written some nice papers, certainly not enough to land me right next to my department chair. And one of the people who trained me, they invited me to do this, I really believe, because I had the knowledge about how to use social media and I had ideas about how to put the journal's content and link it to social media to increase readership and to make sure that the impact of the journal is carried beyond just the traditional metrics that we look at, like citations and impact factor. And so I think that this is because I use social media, it's opened a lot of doors for me that have given me traditional leadership positions and roles that go on my CV and count towards promotion. Also, I've published a lot of papers, 13 papers now in just the past couple years about social media. And that doesn't even count the many scientific medical papers that have come about because I met someone on social media and we had an idea and collaborated together. I get invited to give lectures nationally and even internationally about using social media professionally for medicine. And I've given 45 lectures just on the topic of social media. I've given over 100 lectures total, but 45 of those are about social media. It seems to be all that anyone wants me to speak about anymore when I get invited to meetings. And then also I've been a co-director presenting courses about social media at 2 major national pathology meetings that have been renewed at least for the second time at the CAP and the US CAP. So again, those are things that count for traditional promotion. And it's also this, what I've been doing with social media has gotten out to the news media. And so I've been on the local news a couple of times about this. I've been on a couple of radio programs about it. I got onto BuzzFeed, which was probably going to be the pinnacle of my whole career, actually. So I think it's all downhill from here, but I thought that was really fun to be on BuzzFeed. And then just last week, actually, I was featured in an NPR article about using social media to help patients in the developing world. And I think that all of these things, I don't know if they count traditionally or not, but it sure probably does not hurt that the leaders at my organization see that I'm putting out a good public image for the organization when I'm presented in a positive light on the news. So I think that this is a nice aspect of doing something novel, is that other people look at it and say, what are you doing with social media? Let's learn more about this. So finally, to sum it up, when I got ready in 2016 to apply for promotion to associate professor, I was putting together all my evaluations from my medical students here at my own university and how they rated me as a teacher and as a leader. And I thought maybe I should survey my online students via social media. So I conducted a survey and asked them to evaluate my teaching, my leadership, all of those things purely based on what I post online on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And I included the results in my P&T packet as supplemental information in addition to the traditional things that are in a P&T packet. So what was really amazing is that I got over 1,100 people responded in 4.5 days, and they represented 85 countries around the world, which is really pretty awesome, I think, to show that this is what social media allows us to have this kind of impact. And this is not just me, anyone can do this by using social media to teach and to educate. And what I asked them, how would you describe yourself? And so you can see that's not only pathologists that actually are involved here, but it's also medical students, doctors from other specialties, other types of medical providers, and even cancer patients and survivors who all came. So a really broad swath of people who came to comment on what they thought my social media activity was doing. And I asked them, how would you rate my teaching? The majority said very good. There's always got to be a few haters, I suppose. But that most people said that my teaching was very good. And also most people said that what I was doing with social media was showing strong leadership. So again, I was asking questions and asking them to evaluate me as online learners in the language that the promotion and tenure committee wants to hear when deciding whether or not to give someone promotion and tenure. And maybe the most meaningful question to me was I asked that if for those who were doctors, have my posts actually helped you take better care of patients in real life? And a large proportion of the people said, yeah, they have. And if it's great to get promoted and it's great to do all this for our careers, but the real thing that should matter the most is helping sick people. That's why I became a doctor. And so to know that what I'm doing online actually translates into better health, better healthcare and better patient care around the world, I mean, how can I not continue doing social media when I get results like that? So it's very moving for me to see that this kind of impact is actually translating to real world benefit for patients. And finally, I asked for free text comments and, you know, for people to please leave a comment. And amazingly, 1,000 people out of the 1,100 left comments. And I compiled a document with the best comments, and even still, it was 30 pages long. And I used an online word counting tool to kind of summarize the most common words that were showed up, that, you know, to see 293 times the word helpful or valuable was used, you know, educational, inspiration, innovative, leader, pioneer, mentor. These are words that, you know, easily looking at one chart, you can kind of summarize that there's a general positive trend from all the people who left comments. And I think that would be helpful for my P&T committee to see and recognize that in general, what I'm doing online is actually looked at positively by a large number of people around the world. And again, most importantly, the actual comments themselves, these are examples of real comments from the survey, were very moving, and really, it very touched me very deeply to know that people felt this way, and that what I was doing was actually really helping people, because in the end, making the world a better place, that's the reason that I became a doctor, and that's the reason that I use social media. So I hope that this has been helpful to you, and best of luck in your future attempts at getting a promotion and tenure.
Thank you, Jared. I think you're pretty modest about it, but what you've done is amazing.
Thank you.
I think most researchers looking at this would feel like it's probably quite far from what they would think that they would be able to achieve. So it's really great to see how you've kind of evolved what you've done to reach this level. I guess if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box. We'd be happy to get to them. A question from me, actually, Jared, for you. You've obviously had you know, a while to kind of build up your audiences, and you're achieving really great reach now with the things that you post. If someone was kind of just thinking about starting out using social media, how would you, or what advice would you give them to kind of start building up an audience and getting those followers and driving that engagement?
No, that's a great question. And I think, yeah, for me, it kind of organically happened over time. And I definitely didn't start out anticipating that any of this stuff would happen. It just kind of happened. And I think that what I usually tell, like, for my own students and residents who are in medicine, so physicians, is that the best place to start professionally is Twitter. Twitter is great because it's built to be open, and it easily links you up with other people who you would never have ever met in real life, who have similar interests. Like, you know, I found Jenny Huang, who's a radiologist who has a lot of similar views as me, but she's a neuroradiologist. I would have never gone to the same meetings. I would have never met her except through Twitter. And I found that we have a lot of similar views on things. I actually met some other radiologists from my own university, but I met them on Twitter rather than in real life, which is really amazing. And so I think that Twitter is great because it's pretty easy. It can be, you know, in little snippets of 5 minutes, you can get involved. You can do it while you're standing in line at the grocery store or something. And it's a great way to really bridge out and meet a lot of people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. And then from there, you can see how that goes and decide, you know, like Daniel said, you got to decide what exactly do you want to accomplish. Do you really want to share everything across every possible channel? That can get exhausting. I mean, for me, this is such a big component of my career now that I do try to do that. But even I have to hit a wall at some point. I can't do all of it. So, but I think starting with Twitter is a great place to start. And my online guide has some tips about how to get Twitter set up and running easily.
Yeah, and thanks for those resources that you shared at the beginning. I'm sure anything that saves people time will always be popular. We've had a question from Innocent, who asks, and Daniel, I don't know if you might have something to add to this. Have either of you worked or collaborated with your library or with a librarian within your organisation to either help amplify the message that you're trying to put out, or to share your research further, or even to kind of gather some of the insights to help you measure?
So actually, currently, our librarians at Mayo Clinic track two things. Track the Altmetric score and the other alternative metric score for the faculty. And also they start tracking what is called alternative media or digital media for the faculty who's interested. They don't do it on everybody, but somebody who's interested on that, they will do it, they will track it for you. And you know, just following what Jared just said, I think the entrance gate, the entrance point for digital media scholarship and social media scholarship is Twitter, without no doubt. The key is trying to figure out where your peer group is, and that's done basically following hashtags and probably the pathology hashtags are different from the emergency medicine hashtags or different from the nuclear physics hashtags and so forth. So the only thing is just to be sure to follow the appropriate hashtag, the appropriate community at the end of the day.
Okay, Jared, anything to add there?
Yeah, that's a great point. Hashtags are actually really a great way to find people that, again, you would never have found otherwise. For pathology, we actually have a whole list of, because we have a lot of subspecialties in pathology. So we have a whole list of hashtags based on, dermatopathology, gynecologic pathology, lung pathology, brain pathology. Each of them have their own hashtags because they're all very different. And then, yeah, we interact with our librarians here. Actually, I recently just got invited to join a Teaching with Technology committee, which is the chair of it is actually a librarian. And so I think our librarians are really interested in this idea and really interested in using a lot of their really specific knowledge about how to do specialized searches and how to correlate that and link that up with social media, which I think is really cool. And I think that's a really amazing place for librarians to be as this becomes such a huge thing in medicine and in science today.
I'm really interested to hear possibly a little bit more about the kind of feedback that you've had from people within your institution around, you've obviously gone out and done loads, both of you. What kind of comments have you had from management or from people who are actively reviewing kind of your performance? Are they taking it seriously? Are they interested to hear about it? How do they compare it? Or, how does it tell part of the story alongside the kind of, day-to-day academic work that you do?
I want to hear Daniel's answer, actually, because the Mayo Clinic experience is such an important experience, and I'm always curious to see how they do things.
So our academic promotions and tenure committee start acknowledging and recognizing social media scholarship and social media activities in 2016. And I have to say that Robert Spinner, the chair of the committee, is extremely supportive of innovation and extremely supportive of all these new ideas. And the committee is welcome to review and welcome to reward social media and digital scholarship. The main barrier that I think we have at this point is most of the faculty feels a little bit scared about joining the conversation. Scared for two reasons. One, it is a significant amount of time invested, at least upfront. And I think all the magnificent things that Jared is doing require some time. And they're a little bit afraid that if they spend too much time doing digital scholarship, they may take that time from traditional scholarship. And the other thing is there's still a lot of concerns about how valuable your social media work actually is. I think that barrier is almost over right now. I think the major barrier for faculty is the time investment upfront that requires to do something meaningful in digital platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Those are concerns I hear a lot about the time it takes, and certainly I do spend an awful lot of time on it. But again, it's such a big part of my career. But I do tell people that who are starting out, you don't have to do as much stuff as I'm trying to do, because to me this is important and part of my career. But I think that other people can invest a smaller amount of time and still have really great returns. To me, though, using social media has been, probably the best return on time invested of anything I have done in my entire career. More important than any paper I've ever written, any research I've ever done. And I've written quite a few papers about medical stuff, not just about social media. I've written almost I'm getting close to 80 papers, I think, which is, not nearly as many as some people, but for 5 years in practice, not too bad. And I've worked actually really hard to do that too, because when I went up for promotion, I wanted them to know, I think that I have enough stuff to get promoted based on my traditional activities, but I want to put the social media stuff on the end there just to really hit home how important it is. And with one goal of that, not just being me getting promoted, but I really wanted to help impress upon the P&T committee that this is important, and we should just, even if we encourage our faculty to do this in addition to their other activities, if we let them know that we'll, like Daniel said, that we'd be willing to look at digital scholarship and online social media use professionally, if we're willing to look at it, then more people will do it. And I think that will help the world in many different ways. The more doctors and the more scientists on Twitter and Facebook, the better, I think. So I really feel I hope that over time I can sway people by showing you can still be productive in traditional sense and use social media, and the two mesh very nicely together. And overall, I've been really lucky at University of Arkansas for medical sciences. They've been very supportive, actually. The people that do communications that run the university's social media have actually worked with me and been supportive and approving and retweet my posts and my tweets and things. And I think that's been really, really great to see that they're so receptive to this. My chair is on Twitter, actually my department chair. So I think it's been a really great place that I landed for my first job that has been so willing to let me evolve in this way. And it's really made my career possible. So I'm very thankful to my university for that support.
Yeah, I think it's great to see institutions that are open to embracing kind of moving beyond the four walls of the institution, I suppose, as it were. But like you say, there is obviously an awful lot of work involved in this, and the reality is it does take time. Could you kind of speak a little bit about how you go about managing that and kind of, I don't know, splitting up your week, or, you know, making sure you stay on top of all of these different channels and the conversations that you're having with the various different groups on them?
Yeah, Daniel, do you want to do that one, or do you want me to?
Let me say, you're the expert, but let me say my a small contribution to that. I think like anything in academics requires some organization and requires some discipline. I, for example, run the Mayo Clinic Emergency Medicine blog, which is similar to what Gerald does in terms of dissemination of educational knowledge and some research. And I typically spend half morning with housekeeping and preparing the blog, the post, and preparing the images. And I set up the post to be automatically posted in some days of the week and that kind of thing. And also spend probably like 15 minutes to 20 minutes per day just going through the Facebook accounts, the Twitter accounts, and Reddit, which is important for our flow actually, taking care of housekeeping. So my point is, it requires some discipline and it requires some planning. I think that's important concepts.
Yeah, those are great points, and I think the way that, and I'm still learning over time how to best organize it, because I think that, yeah, with good organization and also with some delegation to a team of people, I could accomplish so much more than I'm actually doing, but it takes time to delegate and to build teams. But I've done that with the couple committees the subcommittees of social media for the USCAP and the American Society of Dermpath. And there we have a team of people that we can work together to kind of divvy up the tasks. And then for my own personal accounts, one of the best things, and I have no financial conflict of interest, but I really like this tool called Buffer app. And there's a variety of other tools, Hootsuite and TweetDeck and all of these, that let you load up tweets and Facebook posts ahead of time. You can load up, say, 10 in one sitting, and then it will tweet them out or post them out 1 per day or 2 per day or only on weekdays, whatever you want. So that's what I do. And pathology is very unique because we have all these pictures that we can share. So it's very well suited to social media. So when I'm signing out, when I'm looking at biopsies and cases each day, I have my phone with me. I actually take most of my microscopic pictures with my iPhone, and I actually have a folder setting. I have some folders in my iPhone, and I will save the pictures and just link them into the folder in where it's a folder called pictures to be edited. Later when I have, I'm waiting for a flight or I'm on an airplane flight and I don't have Wi-Fi, I'll edit those pictures on my phone and get them ready. And then when I have some spare time, I'll build those posts into the Buffer app and then set it to automatically tweet out. That way I don't have a bolus of like 10 tweets coming out at once and then nothing for a week because I'm really busy with cases or something. And then what's nice is that those apps, at least Buffer, allow you can go back through and look at your old tweets, and then you can retweet them and share them again 6 months down the road. And if it's a really cool, interesting case or a really great article that you're sharing today, it's still going to be of interest to people if you share it again in a month or two. And no one's going to get tired of seeing good content, even if they see it a couple of times. So I feel like the tools like that have really helped. Getting some of my residents and students involved in delegating tasks to them have helped. I do, just kind of in my spare time, look through my accounts and see if there's any comments or replies that I need to respond to. But also, I think the more and more followers you get, the less you're able to keep up with every single question that every person asks you. And I think that people understand that, and you have to realize it's okay to not reply to everything. I think that's real hard for people because they feel required to reply to everything just like you would on email. But I think that you have to learn to just let that go and that it's okay. And I think that's kind of how I've done it, but I'm still learning new things about how to manage this time-wise on a daily basis.
You seem to be doing a pretty good job. But I think that point about content and repurposing it and reusing it even is a really good one, because I know for a lot of people the concern is, what on earth would I post and where am I going to get enough stuff to kind of keep making new posts? So it's really interesting to hear that perspective on it. We had one question that specifically related to altmetric, and it was about whether there's a way to compare your altmetric score with other scores within a certain field. Hopefully you can see my screen and see the altmetric details page here. So what we enable you to do is see your attention score in context. So you can find this on any details page that you come across. And here you can see how the attention received by your paper or your research output ranks in comparison with other items published around the same time or in the same journal. So although it's not split by subject, you can start to get an idea so that you're not just looking at the number thinking, what on earth does this mean? You know, 6,727, that sounds big, but what does it actually mean? And I think to kind of tie altmetrics back to what Jared and Daniel have been talking about, and if there was a theme for this webinar, really, it's about using these tools and this data in context. There's no point going out there and doing all this if it doesn't tie in with the aims of what you're trying to achieve. And there's no point in looking at the numbers if you don't have a richer understanding of the extent to which you're achieving that and why people are engaging. So that's always really important to bear in mind, I would say. We're nearly out of time, so if there are no more questions, I think we will leave it there for today. But a huge thank you to you, Jared and Daniel, both fascinating presentations there.
Thanks, it was great to be here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And we've had some great comments on Twitter while you've been speaking, which is always lovely, so I hope you get a chance to read them. So as I said at the beginning, we will send a link to the recording round, hopefully in the next day or two. And we look forward to hearing any feedback that anyone else has. Please do feel free to get in touch. Thank you, everyone, and we'll leave it there for today.